Bay Times, very, very dangerous because you actually, reporters who were there at the Times building trying to do their job and cover this hurricane when this crane comes down. I also have a lot of questions about why you leave a crane up when you're facing a Category 3 hurricane. But what we know this morning is that the flooding is incredibly substantial. We know that some unknown number of people lost their lives because they were killed by tornadoes. We know a few people were killed by tornadoes in a retirement community. We know that there are 3 million people who lost power as a result of this. And in advance, Sagar, there was a huge effort to evacuate as many people as possible from Florida, because if you looked at, the track of this thing, which hit the west coast of Florida near Sarasota and then traveled across the state, it was a large portion of the state, almost the entirety of the state, that was impacted in one way or another by Hurricane Milton. This also coming, as we know, on the heels of Hurricane Helene. Some of these places were still cleaning up and hadn't recovered from Helene, and less than 2 weeks later, hit by another brutally strong storm that was, again, fueled by those very warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico. So, we're still getting a sense of just how much devastation and damage here and what the death toll will ultimately be.
Yeah, what's really crazy is all those tornadoes that also ripped through Florida at the same time.
Yeah.
So I have the numbers here in front of me. There were 116 tornado warnings that were issued across the state, including far away on the different side of the coast. I'm not exactly sure of why, something to do with barometric pressure, etc. But nearly 125 homes were destroyed. A lot of these were areas that didn't actually expect, to be hit by the hurricane, or were kind of less of an impact, and so they were pretty surprised by all of that happening. But so far, the damage still, while the damage in St. Petersburg and in some of these other areas, the initial storm surge that was indicated was almost like 6 to 7 feet that came through. So, that's just devastating for a lot of the homes and the other areas. It's still very early in the morning, so we don't have like a full account, but, people are going to have to return. There's going to have to be quite a lot of rebuilding, especially in a lot of those downtown areas. Florida authorities and others are already preparing for the influx of people coming back and seeming to prepare. So I think it's going to be a days and perhaps like a weeks, even years-long thing, to recover the area.
Yeah. There were some people who had fled from the inland devastation of Hurricane Helene to some of these areas in Florida and then had to evacuate and flee again because of this storm. It reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you guys recall, after Katrina hit famously in Louisiana, New Orleans area, a lot of people fled to Texas, Sagar. I'm sure you remember this.
I was there,
and then Hurricane Rita hits and devastates areas of Texas, and they're left once again fleeing and trying to preserve their lives and their livelihoods and their possessions. Just to echo what you were saying about the storm surge and the amount of water here, truly astonishing. So this is from Matthew Capucci. He says, "This is insane. St. Petersburg," he's an atmospheric scientist, by the way, and self-described storm chaser. St. Petersburg has reported 5.09 inches of rain in 1 hour. More than 5 inches of rain in a single hour and 9 inches in 3 hours. He says that is actually more rare than a 1,000-year rain event. So just wrap your head around the fact that we had 2 storms in a 2 weeks time period that were 1 in 1,000 year events, or at least they previously were. And, of course, you can't say exactly how much is climate change and how much is just, things that happen during hurricane season. But every meteorologist seems to indicate that the exceptionally warm waters in the Gulf of Mexico are part of what contributed to the strength and ultimate devastation of both of these storms. And so in a lot of ways, this is sort of, the devastating new normal. You already have a situation in Florida that we've covered before, Sagar, where
insurance,
you can't, in certain parts of Florida, in certain areas, you literally cannot get homeowners insurance. So Florida, while it's seen, huge population boom, a lot of people moving to the state because they like some of the, the political policies, they like the quality of life, they like the sunshine, the ocean, all of that. Then not only is housing, of course, expensive everywhere and expensive in Florida, but then you're hit with this additional massive cost for homeowners insurance if you can even get it. this is going to continue to be an escalating problem. I know some of these insurers dropped another several 100,000 customers from their policies. The state really has no idea how to handle this, doesn't have the money or sufficient funds in order to themselves run a homeowners insurance market for areas that are essentially uninsurable now. So that's sort of, some of the longer term projection here. Sagar was talking about the tornadoes. Let's go ahead and put A3 up on the screen. This gives you a sense of how many tornadoes were cited and hit Florida as a consequence of Hurricane Milton. So the National Weather Service issued about 100 tornado warnings between noon and 6 yesterday in Florida. At least 20 reports of sightings and damage. And as I mentioned before, usually with hurricanes, it's not uncommon that you have tornadoes that spin up as a result of hurricanes or storms in general. But apparently I was reading this morning that these were exceptionally strong. Usually the tornadoes that you get associated with hurricanes are relatively weak and peter out quickly. These were exceptionally strong. And we know, as I said before, that they claimed some number of lives. We're not sure how many at this point. So that was part of what caused so much damage and devastation in the state. In advance of the hurricane yesterday, Kamala Harris took the opportunity actually to call into the Weather Channel and to explain to people what benefits were available for them, and also notably to issue a warning to would-be price gougers about taking advantage of people's desperation. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
There are federal resources you are entitled to receive without condition. And there are resources that are available to you to deal with what you need right now, to, for example, get money to be able to fill your prescriptions and deal with a hotel expense and help you recover over the longer term. The other point I would make is this, and I've done this work in my career. Sadly, there are some folks who, during the moment of a crisis, will be very predatory and start jacking up prices like gasoline or hotels, or airlines to take advantage of the desperation people are experiencing. So to anybody who's thinking about jacking up those prices, those companies that are thinking about doing it, know that we are monitoring and we're watching. And if there is that kind of price gouging, that there will be a consequence for that, because it's just wrong to take advantage of people who are desperate for help. And so know that we're watching that as well.
So, of course, Sagar, using natural disasters and hurricanes as for political purpose and age-old pursuit.
I was going to say, we're in it right now. Ron DeSantis just went on television this morning because there's been this whole beef between. It was like Kamala called DeSantis, and apparently he was like, I'm not going to take the call. And then actually Kamala's advisors are very upset right now with Joe Biden because Biden was like, oh, he's doing a great job. Ron DeSantis and Biden apparently have been on the phone.
Well, because DeSantis also complimented Biden.
Yes, because DeSantis complimented Biden. He's like, well, Biden's actually the president. I mean, he does have a point. He went on television this morning.
What does the vice president really have to do with anything, if we're being honest?
He said, well, all the storms I've dealt with under this administration, she has never called into Florida or offered any support. She's trying to inject herself into this because of her political campaign. I also read that Kamala advisors were furious that Biden took the podium at the press briefing because it kind of, I believe there was like a counter programming going on because she had some event that she was participating in. So yes, the political machinations behind the hurricane are alive and well. Almost certainly we'll see it too with visits, maybe separate visits by Kamala and Biden to view the destruction. That's another time-honored tradition for presidents. Trump as well, in terms of how they decide to respond. But overall, I would just hope, especially that Florida can do what North Carolina has done now so far. North Carolina, in general, actually seems quite committed to being like, hey, we're temporarily going to make sure that people who are displaced can be able to vote. We're going to figure this out. We'll set up precincts, etc. Let's set up the same thing for Florida, and let's try and not let this, at least, make it too political. Let's just make sure people in Tampa, Sarasota, etc. come home, rebuild. Definitely thinking about that insurance thing. In fact, this could be a landmark moment in the history of insurance because we're going to find out just how much the devastation is, whether that state-backed insurance company has the funds and is able to meet those goals. It could require billions of bailout from the federal government, which I don't know. I mean, it's complicated because we got California and Florida, two of the most populous states in the entire union, who now basically are uninsurable from wildfires and from hurricanes. And then is the federal government just going to backstop that? Like, how does it work?
Right.
You know,
That's right.
It's a crazy system.
That's
I don't know. I'm of two minds. You know, they both create a ton for the economy, both Florida and